All right. Hello, everybody. I think we are live. I think we're all getting started. I'm just going to set up a few things here and there. I know it's a weird time to be doing this today. I don't know how many people are going to be here today on a Sunday early evening as opposed to the usual time, but I was gone pretty much all of last week. I'm going to be gone later this week. And so this turned out to be the best time to do this. And there are so many stories I wanted to talk about that I figured, let me just go ahead and do this today. And then we should be back to normal in about a week and a half at the usual time. So, a couple quick things. As always, if you're watching the live stream, you could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And you can all go to friendlyatheist.com to subscribe to the newsletter, which is the best option for everybody. I don't know if Den is able to make it today. Right now, he's not here, so I will do my best to get through all the comments as people are chatting, and I'll look through them at the end of a story. Also, this coming weekend, if you are anywhere near Chicago, the American Humanist Association is having their conference. I will be there for the first half of it, like Thursday, Friday-ish, and I hope for anyone who's coming there, I will see you there. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of these stories just because there's a lot to get through. Let me start by talking about the big Ten Commandments ruling that came down this week. Now, I say this as I think just yesterday, Greg Abbott in Texas signed a bill that would require every classroom in the state of Texas to put the Ten Commandments up. Whether it's going to stay that way remains to be seen. I've already heard from church-state separation groups that they plan to file a lawsuit pretty quickly, so that you probably are going to see that coming down in the next day or two. But that's not the thing I wanted to talk about. The thing I wanted to talk about is what an appellate court said about an identical law in Louisiana. So I'm going to walk you through what this case is all about and what this appellate court said, because this is one of the biggest decisions we've seen in a while come down about these Ten Commandments laws. So let me back up and tell you what this law is about, and then we'll go from there. Basically, earlier, was it last year? Last year in Louisiana, they passed this bill during the 2024 regular session. It's a bill to put the Ten Commandments in public schools, and you could see right over here, line 18, they tell you exactly which things they want to put up in the classroom. Like every poster that goes up has to have these words on it. I don't need to read them to you. It's the Ten Commandments, even though if you count the list they actually have there, it's more than 10 thou shalt not. It's kind of weird, but okay. But they put up, that's what they wanted in this bill. It was sponsored by a Republican representative, Dodie Horton. She said that the Ten Commandments had to be placed on a poster or framed document that's like 11 by 14 inches. And the text of the commandments has to be front and center in a large font. Yeah. We've seen this a lot. The House bill that she sponsored actually said schools had to pay for the posters themselves, whether through their own funds or through donated funds, but they could also accept donations. It never actually said what the penalty would be for any school that did not want to participate in that Christian charade. Now, obviously, why are they doing this? We know the reason they're doing this. It's to inject Christianity into the public schools. That's what this is always about. Now, because they are conservative Christians, they are also liars. So they don't say that out loud. They tell you it's about the founding of our country and we need to respect those foundations. But obviously, this is about promoting Christianity. Let me take just a second to explain why this is dumb for all sorts of reasons beyond the legal side of this. The same people, and I know I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, the same people who don't want high school students or younger learning about sex, systemic racism, LGBTQ people, they have very specific things they want you to know about what you can or cannot do with your neighbor's maidservants, right? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, too. Like, it's always a meaningless gesture because their argument is that this is the sort of thing that could instill morality in kids. This is the sort of thing that's going to stop school shooters. Not taking away guns and access to guns, but making sure a potential shooter sees the words "thou shalt not kill" as if that's going to make them rethink whatever it is they were going to do. It would be nice if those kids could see mental health professionals, but in Louisiana, like other states, they're trying to get Christian chaplains in public schools instead of actual experts. And obviously, if you look at any version of the Ten Commandments these people want to put up, the first several commandments have nothing to do with morality. It's ridiculous religious shit like, don't worship false gods, don't worship graven images, don't take God's name in vain, you got to keep the Sabbath day holy. There is no secular purpose for any of those commandments. Plenty of the other ones are also not illegal. You know what? If you don't want to honor thy parents, maybe you have a good reason not to. So, and the other thing to point out is that public school teachers were not asking for this. This is the government micromanaging public education in a way that doesn't help anybody, but it riles up their own base who doesn't care about anything but this sort of thing. So this bill passed in the Louisiana House. It made it to the Louisiana Senate, and they were like, oh no, this is totally illegal. We need to make some fixes to this. So they did make a few changes to the bill that they thought could help them avoid a lawsuit. One is that they decided, they decided that every poster needed to come with a disclaimer. And this is the disclaimer they wanted next to these posters. It says, look, this is historical, you guys. It's not about promoting Christianity. This is like a tradition we've had in the education system forever. And they list a few different books here. Like in the year 1688, the New England Primer became the first published American textbook, blah, 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 that was used in public schools to teach Americans to read and contained more than 40 questions about the Ten Commandments. Which also, if that was in 1688, who the hell cares? That has nothing to do with the foundation of this country. Like, they're just literally pulling anything they could find that has any connection to the Ten Commandments and saying, look, we found this thing from hundreds of years ago, therefore it's okay to push Christianity on kids now. So that was one thing they did. They tried to shove this disclaimer as if that would make it clear this is not about pushing religion on kids. Another change. The Senate's version of the bill said schools can have the option of putting up copies of the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, and the Northwest Ordinance alongside the Ten Commandments. See, you guys, the Ten Commandments are just one of many ancient documents that inspired our legal system. Even though those other documents we're making you put up as an option all have references to God. And also, again, those are optional. You do not have to put up those other signs. So if the bill says the Christian list is mandatory, but the other historical documents are optional, that's still an illegal promotion of religion. So what the hell? It doesn't help. The Senate's version of the bill also said no public funds could be used for the displays. The only thing you're allowed to do is you can take donations for posters or donations of cash so you can buy posters. So they're trying to make it clear, see, no taxpayer funding used, so you can't say tax dollars are promoting religion. But the bottom line is that the schools would still be forced to put up the Ten Commandments. So nothing the Senate did was going to make this legal. I don't know what they were thinking. And actually, after this bill got signed, even the governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, said in a statement he couldn't wait to be sued over this. Like, he knew damn well what he was doing. And he knew church-state separation groups would be mad about it. And of course, he was right. They did get sued over this very quickly after the bill got signed. And to be, without getting into all the details, because I have made videos about this bill in the past, basically, what the lawsuit said is that no matter how you slice it, the Ten Commandments bill is illegal. It is a promotion of Christianity. So on that basis, it violates the First Amendment. So it's got to go. But even if you want to argue that this has nothing to do with church-state separation or the promotion of Christianity, if you want to argue the Ten Commandments has a tradition of being in the public schools, guess what? That is not true. The lawsuit, which, by the way, was filed by, who was it? The ACLU of Louisiana, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They represented a coalition of families. Some of them were non-religious, some were very religious, but all of them said, it is wrong for you to shove your religion when I'm trying to raise my kids a certain way. But they also pointed out, like, this is clearly about pushing religion. Do you know how we know that? Guess what? If you ask the sponsors of this bill why they want the Ten Commandments in schools, we have quotations they have said about how it's pushing religion. In fact, they quoted the law's primary sponsor, Dodie Horton, saying that the bill seeks to have a display of God's law in the classroom for children to see what he says is right and what he says is wrong. And another Republican, a co-author of this bill, said he supported the law, and anyone who criticized it was waging an attack on Christianity. And he said it would provide a religious counterbalance to what he claimed was students' secular education. So in the process of defending this bill, Republicans were like, why are you going after my faith? And then Democrats are like, did you say your faith? Is that what this bill is about? And Republicans are like, no, it's about tradition. Fingers crossed, whatever. The lawsuit pointed out, you know, that the other posters that Louisiana schools could put up, the Mayflower Compact, all that stuff, there's no size requirement for those. Not only is it optional, they could be as tiny as you want to make them out to be so that the Ten Commandments are prioritized. Another sign that this is about elevating religion. They called out what the founding fathers said. In the bill itself, it actually quotes James Madison as saying, we have staked the whole future of our new nation upon the capacity of each of ourselves to govern ourselves according to the moral principles of the Ten Commandments. Well, the lawsuit points out that James Madison never said that. It's a fake thing that is attributed to him, but Madison never said that. Now, Christian pseudo-historian David Barton lies about that, but Madison never said it. So, like, anything you are doing, the lawsuit says, anything these Republicans are doing to pretend this is tradition, this is about American history, is just BS. And so they just made that very, very clear. One of my favorite things about how Louisiana responded to the lawsuit is they said, you cannot sue us because, one, these posters have not gone up in the classrooms yet, so you have nothing to be offended about. And in a press conference, the Attorney General of Louisiana actually said, listen, my office, her name is Liz Morrell, she said, my office has made some sample posters that include the Ten Commandments that you could put up in the classroom. And you guys, clearly, this is not elevating Christianity. And I want to show you, I've done this before. I don't care. I'm showing you again. This is one of the posters she wanted to put up here. She said, look, here's one of your people's favorite people, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying, since the beginning of time, the world has known 4 great documents. Great, because of all the benefits to humanity which came about as a result of their fine ideals and principles. And what does she have on this list? The 1689 English Bill of Rights, the Ten Commandments as stated in their bill, the Declaration of Independence right over here, and this one's the Magna Carta. And the thing is, this, the Attorney General is saying, would be legal because it includes the Ten Commandments, but it also includes these other optional documents. And like, this would be fine. So how could you possibly say this is a promotion of Christianity? It's clearly not. I just want to point out, Ruth Bader Ginsburg never said this thing up here in any of her Supreme Court filings. Where did that quotation come from? Well, I can trace it back for you because she published a book a couple years before her death in which she was talking about what she was like as a kid. And she shared in this memoir she wrote, she said, you know, when I was a kid in elementary school, grade 8, and her name was just Ruth Bader, she wrote an essay in 8th grade that began with these words. Sorry, let me bring that back here. That began with these words, promoting the Ten Commandments. The first was the Ten Commandments, which was given to Moses, ... Today, people of almost every religion respect and accept them as a code of ethics and a standard of behavior. Which, first of all, well written for an 8th grader, but 2, she had changed her jurisprudence by the time she got on the bench. This is not something Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in any of her writings later on in life. So if your best bet to say why the Ten Commandments can be legally put up in school is by citing something Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in 8th grade before she was legally an adult, you know you are not going to do very well with this lawsuit. But, so they filed this lawsuit, and when I last made a video about this, I think it was about a year ago, or maybe less than a year ago, but the judge in November of last year finally issued a ruling on this case, and he trashed this Louisiana bill. It was gorgeous. I want to show you just a couple of the things that he pointed out here. Let me see if I could find one thing I wanted to find. Here we go. He issued the whole historical revisionism thing that the plaintiffs were saying. This is what he said. Let me see if I can pull this up. Here we go. Why does he keep doing that? Look at this line right here. This is what the judge said, the federal district court judge. In sum, the historical evidence showed that the instances of using the Ten Commandments in public school were too scattered to amount to convincing evidence that it was common at the time of the founding or incorporation of the First Amendment to utilize the Decalogue in public school education. That is, the evidence demonstrates that the practice at issue, putting the Ten Commandments in school, does not fit within and is otherwise not consistent with a broader historical tradition during those time periods, which is legalese for saying, why are these Christians lying to me? And he just smacked it down entirely. He also pointed out that it was absolutely coercive to make kids have to see this. This is what he said later on in this in his ruling. Each of the plaintiff's minor children will be forced in every practical sense, through Louisiana's required attendance policy, to be a captive audience and to participate in a religious exercise, reading and considering a specific version of the Ten Commandments, one posted in every single classroom for the entire school year, regardless of the age of the student or subject matter. So yeah, by forcing kids to have to look at this, you are shoving your religion in their faces. So this judge just completely smacked it down in every possible way he could. And the other thing is that the state of Louisiana said this doesn't violate the First Amendment. And the judge said, what are you talking about? They maintain that they can comply with the Establishment Clause by surrounding the Ten Commandments with non-religious matter, no matter how outlandish that material may be. That is to say, the Attorney General defendants believe they can constantly change their iterations, leaving potential challengers trying to seize and hold the ever-shifting Proteus until Proteus eventually tires. That's a reference to mythology. But basically, no matter how much you want to do, the judge is saying, you want to put posters around it? That doesn't fix the problem here. You want to put a disclaimer with the poster? That doesn't fix any of the problems. And so the judge didn't fall for it. Okay? He was very specific to say there's nothing legal about putting the Christian Ten Commandments, the KJV version, no less, in public schools. That decision by that judge in November struck down the law. It was unconstitutional. And he made that ruling before any school, to my knowledge, ever put up the Ten Commandments in their classrooms to begin with. So that was wonderful news. But where we left off with this bill is that you knew Louisiana was going to appeal. They want this case to go to the Supreme Court. And so the next step is it gets filed with the appellate court. And that's what we were waiting on. That's what a bunch of other states, I think last time I did videos, Arkansas just passed a bill to put the Ten Commandments up in public schools. They've already been sued over that. Texas just passed that law like this week. They're about to get sued over that. So what's this appellate court going to do now? And the good news is that this week, the appellate court issued their decision. I know this is weird font, by the way. but this is their decision. This is the ultra-conservative Fifth Circuit. Normally, you don't want anything to go through the Fifth Circuit, but this is a 50-page response where they document everything that is happening. You have these 3 judges right here who are listening to the case. In case you're wondering, those 3 were appointed by Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Joe Biden. And guess what? They basically said in their ruling, hey, remember that earlier decision from November? Yeah, it's solid. So everything they said earlier, everything that judge said earlier, we endorse it. So the law is still unconstitutional. And one of the things they point out is that what law are they citing in defense of their ruling here? What they say is that by forcing kids to have to deal with the 10 Commandments every day in school, that's obviously illegal. And it's already identical to another law that the Supreme Court has already said you cannot have. It's called Stone v. Graham. It involves the 10 Commandments in the state of Kentucky. And about 50 years ago, the Supreme Court said that is illegal. And so if you have this law in Louisiana, and it's functionally identical to what they did in Kentucky 50 years ago, well, guess what? Then the Supreme Court precedent says we got to declare the Louisiana law unconstitutional as well. And these judges called bullshit on the claim that putting up the 10 Commandments would help kids understand and appreciate the foundational documents of the state and the national government. The judges pointed out, like, those foundational documents that you want the kids to see, those are optional in your bill, like the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence. And also, you don't even have to make them into large posters, so you don't care about it. They said, look, it's not our decision here. The Supreme Court said in Stone v. Graham that 10 Commandments in schools is illegal. We're bound by that. So your law is also unconstitutional. Now, one of the things Louisiana said is, well, remember Justice Kennedy, that football coach, Joe Kennedy in the state of Washington, the guy who wanted to do these showboaty prayers in the middle of the football field after games? The Supreme Court said he's allowed to do that. And in the process of saying he's allowed to do that, they basically got rid of something called the Lemon Test, which is the test that lets judges figure out if something violates church-state separation or not. The Kennedy case said the Lemon Test is no longer in effect. And what these justices said is it doesn't matter if that law is no longer in effect, because there are plenty of other laws that are in effect, and all of them say the 10 Commandments in school is still illegal. So, pick your poison. If you think the Lemon Test doesn't apply anymore, well, we still have the Establishment Clause. We still have this ruling in Stone v. Graham. And until the Supreme Court tells us otherwise, we are bound to follow their precedent. So they said, your Louisiana law is unconstitutional. You cannot put up the 10 Commandments in schools. Now, the obvious question is, okay, well, what happens now? Is Louisiana going to appeal this? And in the one statement that the state has made so far, this is what the Attorney General said. She said, we will continue to pursue the case through the courts. We strongly disagree with the Fifth Circuit's affirmance of an injunction preventing 5 Louisiana parishes from implementing HB 71. And this is important. We will immediately seek relief from the full Fifth Circuit, which is an option. Like, okay, maybe I got unlucky with those 3 judges. I'm going to ask the entire super conservative Fifth Circuit to look at this, and if necessary, the U.S. Supreme Court. And what that means is the state of Louisiana is not done fighting this yet. They really want a court to say that the 10 Commandments have nothing to do with Christianity. It's just part of American history. And so far, none of the judges they have come across are willing to cross that line because they know that's bullshit. And I don't know what happens now. I don't know if the Fifth Circuit wants to take up this case. Usually, if 3 judges unanimously say this thing is dumb and illegal, you really don't need a full circuit court to take a full appellate court to look at anything. It's not like they got to break a tie. This one's pretty obvious. And even the Supreme Court, I got to say, even with this ultra-conservative Supreme Court, they really haven't shown much interest in trying to overturn law in obvious ways to promote Christianity. Like, I know they do it sometimes, but they make arguments like, look, this is an edge case and we're giving it to the Christians. This is not an edge case. This is one of those, it's obviously promoting Christianity and everyone can see that. And the Supreme Court doesn't seem to want to take up cases like this when there's no reason for them to do it. Doesn't mean they're going to say no. Louisiana's going to keep fighting this. But again, if Louisiana ignored legal precedent and they clearly just want to make sure their brand of Christianity gets preferential treatment, it is really hard, even in this legal environment, to find courts that are willing to grant you that premise. Because right now, everyone knows they're bullshitting. So hopefully the next thing that happens is the full Fifth Circuit says we are not looking at this case. There's nothing for us to weigh in on here. And hopefully the Supreme Court, enough of the justices say, yeah, there's nothing for us to deal with here. This is pretty clear cut and simple. You don't need us weighing in on this. That's the ideal situation. And that would basically put an end for now to all of these 10 Commandment bills that are going up in Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas. So we'll see. Okay, I am going to stop there. I appreciate this comment. If you're watching this channel, upvote it now. You might forget later. You can also like and subscribe and all of that. Den is not here. Give me a second to just look through any comments really quick. I know they're desperate to get it to the Supreme Court, but just because they're desperate to get it there, the Louisiana assumption is that the conservatives on the court will obviously see things their way. And I just don't know that this is one of those cases that they really want to take up because it's such a blatant promotion of Christianity. I don't know that they really want to do that. As much as they want to overturn the Establishment Clause, we will see. All right. I hope I'm not forgetting anything here. I'm going to move on to the next story. Give me 1 second to pull it up. And drink up. Oh, I'm excited about this story. Let's talk about this. Okay. I will tell you a story. Many years ago, I heard these rumors. This is back in the old days of the internet. There was one of those like email forwards you got that suggested there were very few atheists in the US federal prison system. The thing is, and I won't go through the whole history, it was like I saw this statistic popping up everywhere in atheist forums and whatnot. But if you try to trace it back to where they're getting this information from, it always came back to like one person or one name. And it's because they contacted the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but they contacted someone who no longer worked there. It was really hard to trace the origin of this, what I thought was a myth, because I couldn't verify those numbers anywhere. So about a decade ago, I filed a federal Freedom of Information Act request with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And I said, I want to know the religious breakdown of everyone in the US prison system, right? And to my surprise, in 2013, they sent me a response and they gave me a printout of the numbers everywhere. And what ended up happening is, one, I was able to not just confirm that the percentage of atheists, open stated atheists in federal prisons was really low. It was actually lower than the rumor I had heard in the past. Kind of mind-blowing. And I realized, and I know some of you are thinking this, there's a lot of caveats to that. Yes, there are. I'm going to go into those. But basically, for years to come, I kept filing those Freedom of Information Act requests to get updated numbers. And then a few years ago, like starting in 2022, I basically stopped hearing from the government. I would file, like it's in my calendar, like go ahead and file the paperwork. They didn't respond to me. I actually looked up my 2023 request in their database like this week, and it said pending. Like still, really, 2 years later? But I've still filed it every year. And here's the surprising thing. I think about a month and a half ago, I went ahead and filed it this year. And last week or so, I got a response from the government. And they basically said, we found the data you're looking for. We have been cleared to share this information with you. Like, we got approval. We're not giving you anything you're not allowed to see. And I can share this data with you right now. Like, this is the spreadsheet they sent me. And there's a bunch of things going on here. I realize this is all very tiny font, but I want to share with you a couple things here. Look at the very top, what this says. What this gets us is right here. There's a whole bunch of federal prisons all over the country. And so they have the breakdown. And this is the primary religion that is cited by all these prisoners. And you could see they have a bunch of options here. American Indian, Catholic, Muslim, no preference. There's a bunch of different types of other religions. Atheist, we'll get to that. Buddhist, humanist is the term. We'll talk about that. But they have this listing of all these religions, and then Protestant and unknown. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom right here just to show you, where did it go? At the very bottom of this list, here's the number that is important. 155,000, a little more than that. 155,000. That's how many prisoners are in the US federal prison system. So then the question comes up, how many atheists are in the federal prison system? And if I scroll for that, here's my atheist list right here. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, here is the number right over here, 113. There are 113 atheists out of, what was that number again? 155,000. And if you do the math on that, basically that means atheists, stated open atheists, represent 0.073% of the federal prison population. Less than 0.1% of federal prisoners are out atheists. That's what I got from this database that they sent me. And again, I know millions of caveats, I'm going to get to them. But what that means on paper is that the presence of atheists in US federal prisons is significantly lower than the presence of atheists in the general population. And in case you want to play that game with any, so that means how many atheists are in the country? Well, atheists represent about 5% of the US population. But again, we are less than 0.1% of the prison population. Catholics, they're 19% of the population. They represent about 12.5% of prisoners. Muslims are 1% of the population, but nearly 10% of inmates. Now, what's with all these discrepancies? Well, first of all, about a third of federal inmates have no stated religious label or non-religious label at all. We don't know what they believe. And the reason humanist is on that list is because about a decade ago, the American Humanist Association filed a lawsuit saying prisoners who were humanists should be allowed to identify with that label and receive the same perks afforded to religious inmates because of that, such as access to meeting space, the ability to discuss their beliefs with larger groups. They said that's a perk religious groups get, and yet our members who are humanists and part of that religion, how come they don't get the same perks? They filed a lawsuit over this. The judges basically sided with the prisoners, and so now the federal prison system keeps track of how many humanists there are as well. And again, on the spreadsheet, 61 inmates are called humanists. And even if all those who identify, even if all of them identified as atheists instead of humanists, we're still less than 0.1% of the federal prison population. Okay, interesting numbers. It is a fun statistic to look at. Here's why I will downplay everything I just told you. Here's why maybe none of that matters. Bunch of reasons for this. One is the way back in the day, when I heard people citing this statistic, it was to make the argument that atheists are more moral than the rest of the population. But this is why I would urge you not to use this number to defend atheist morality as if religion does not make you a better person or anything like that. Why do people end up in federal prisons? Well, the reasons can be complicated. It's not just that every prisoner is like some sort of murderer. Like high poverty rates affect who goes to prison. Lower formal education levels affect who goes to prison. Plain old racism affects who gets targeted to go to prison. Those are significant factors. And obviously religious beliefs tend to correlate with many of those things. You know, if you are in a high poverty environment, odds are there's more religion in your community. If you have lower formal education, in some surveys I have seen, it says that is connected with higher religious beliefs, right? PhDs are a lot less religious than people with no high school diploma. Okay, so a lot of the factors that lead to people ditching their religion entirely, like more education, it also helps people avoid the kind of decisions that you might make that might land you in prison. So it's not just about morality. There are so many more factors that people should consider. So this is not a proxy for who's good and who's bad. This number should not be used to suggest that atheists are good while religious people are relatively bad to them. So keep that in mind, right? It's not, there's no correlation, not from this data, between religiosity and criminality. And if you've studied anything or read anything about this subject, you know there is systemic racial, socioeconomic disparities in our prison system. So you got to keep that in mind. Here's another thing you should keep in mind. These numbers are also, these labels are all self-reported. Like, we don't know how many more atheist or humanist prisoners might be falling in the category of no preference or other or unknown. For all we know, some of them might have just said, I'm Catholic, whatever, because that's the faith they were raised in. And there are benefits in prison to saying you are religious, right? You might get to leave the premises to go to a church service, and that's better than just sitting in a cell all day. You might get to go to a group Bible discussion, a Bible study, which is more interesting than the alternatives. So there is benefit in prison to saying you're religious. Obviously, if you're trying to get out of prison and maybe the parole board is taking a look at what you've done while you've been behind bars, and they find out, oh, this person's a very religious man. He's been studying the Bible. He's atoned for what he did. Maybe in your head, you think this makes it more likely I'm going to get out of prison. Whereas if you say you're an atheist, that might be used against you. So there are reasons people might say they are religious even though they're not, right? So they also may be unaware that they could use labels like humanist to get the perks of religion without necessarily believing in God. So keep in mind that these labels are self-reported and people may not want to tell the truth for reasons, whether it stems from ignorance or strategy or anything like that. So that's another caveat. I already mentioned the thing about parole, and maybe if you're an inmate, you don't want to say, let's say you were raised in a religious family, you get arrested, you're going to federal prison, you've been charged with a crime, and they ask you what your religion is. Maybe you don't want to say you're Christian. Maybe some of these people said, I'm atheist, because they didn't want to say, oh man, I went to church as a kid and I still did this, so I'm going to lie about it. You don't know that. Like, there might be reasons people say they are religious to get the benefits associated with it, or they say they're not religious because they're ashamed of admitting they're religious because they were raised differently. Everything I also told you, these are all federal numbers. This is in the federal prison system, but there are more prisons out there at the state level. I don't have the religious demographics of that population. I can't, there's no one-stop shop to get those numbers, so I haven't been able to get them. And the other thing to keep in mind is, I don't know when all this data was acquired. Like, is it when the prisoners are first admitted into prison? What if they change their minds while they're in prison? And how well do these labels reflect what they currently think about God? I don't know. We don't have those answers. One legal expert I talked to said, it's likely some of these identifiers were pulled from a pre-sentencing report or just designated by the individuals somewhere on some piece of paperwork. And if you're a Christian who goes to church on Christmas and Easter, you might not go out of your way to make sure your religious label is accurate to get the benefits that might come with it. So you got to take these at face value and not look way beyond that to make these generalizations that may not be fair. There's not a lot you can infer from this data as much as I want to. But even with all those caveats, I do think there is some benefit to having these numbers on paper, because I think even when you consider the caveats, it does counter the assumption that I think some religious conservatives have, that immoral atheists are to blame for a lot of the problems in society. Because I think if you ask conservative Christians, do you think there are more or less atheists in prison compared to the rates in the general population? I think there's a lot of conservatives, a lot of pastors who would say the federal prison system is full of atheists who then maybe convert in prison. And the fact is that is not true. There's no data whatsoever suggesting anything even close to that, right? Like, if you are religious, the thinking is you would never do something so awful that could land you behind bars, or that if you do any of those things, you are not a real Christian. But if Protestants make up about 17% of the federal prison population, and Catholics make up 19%, and Muslims make up nearly 10%, which we know is true because that's what the labels say, I think it's harder to argue that all of those people are exaggerating their beliefs. Many of them are probably accurately telling you what they believe. And I think these numbers are helpful because it makes us have a deeper discussion about our prison system as a whole and the role religion plays before, during, and after entering it. Handing prisoners a Bible is not going to make them better people when they're behind bars. Requiring them to meet with religious chaplains or listening to visiting ministers or participating in Bible studies when they don't believe this shit is not going to make them better people. The path to redemption doesn't have to go through God. That's kind of the bottom line here. So I find it interesting, despite the caveats, and I just want to be clear, I acknowledge all the caveats, but I do think it's interesting that this information is out there, and I'm going to keep trying to get it every year because I want to see how that changes over the course of the next several years. So I will leave it at that. Let me just run through and see if there are any other questions here before I move on to another story. This is an interesting thing. A conservative Christian often pulls their trump card of, as an atheist, what keeps you from raping and killing? And I maybe this is something Matt Dillahunty once said, but as an atheist, nothing is stopping me from doing those things. I do those things as often as I want to do them, which is never. And if you need God to prevent you from doing any of those horrible things, it sounds like you're the problem. I'm paraphrasing Dillahunty, obviously. He said it very well. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to just consider how wrong that assumption is. This is interesting. They ask your religious label as part of the admissions process because they have to reasonably accommodate your religious beliefs. And the interesting thing about that, I don't know how many of these numbers come directly from the admission process, but the reason we had to do this lawsuit over humanists in prison is because they were not being reasonably accommodated. And finally, the Bureau of Prisons said, fine, we'll accommodate you. So interesting. What else is there here? Den, where are you? I need you to help me out. Thank you for this donation. I appreciate it. There's incentive to claim religion in prison too, even if atheists, which can screw with the numbers. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of perks that come from saying you are religious in prison. All right, I'm going to jump down. Someone's saying that's not a Dillahunty thing. That's a Penn Jillette quote. I don't know which person originated it. I apologize if I got it wrong. All right, I'm going to jump to the next story. Give me 1 second here to pull it up. Oh, this is another weird spreadsheet story. For some reason, there were a bunch of those this week, but this is also fascinating. Okay. Do you remember the Trump Bible? Donald Trump last year, while he was campaigning, decided to take time out of his busy schedule of golfing to promote a Bible. And I'm going to play the video for you to start this off, just in case you haven't seen it. This is Trump hawking a Bible that he was selling for a hell of a lot of money.
Religion and Christianity are the biggest things missing from this country. And I truly believe that we need to bring them back, and we have to bring them back fast. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have. That's why our country is going haywire. We've lost religion in our country. All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. It's my favorite book. It's a lot of people's favorite book. In the end, we do not answer to bureaucrats in Washington. We answer to God in heaven. Christians are under siege. We must protect content that is pro-God. We love God, and we have to protect anything that is pro-God. We must defend God in the public square and not allow the media or the left-wing groups to silence, censor, or discriminate against us. We have to bring Christianity back into our lives and back into what will be again a great nation. Our founding fathers did a tremendous thing when they built America on Judeo-Christian values. Now that foundation is under attack, perhaps as never before.
Yep, remember that? And now Trump is honoring the Christian God by dropping bombs on countries just on a whim because he feels like it. But to talk about the Bible thing, the reason I bring that up is because the White House just released information from the Office of Government Ethics, which I didn't know still existed, but apparently it's still there. And they basically filed paperwork that explains how much money Trump is making from his various endeavors. And this is the part of it I wanted to show you right over here. I did it again, sorry. But look at this. So they explain to you like, oh, look, cryptocurrency wallet. He has a licensing agreement with an NFT group for those stupid cards he made. But if you go to 22.5, the Greenwood Bible, this is the Bible that Trump was hawking. And it says whatever the underlying assets, blah, blah, blah. What do we learn from 22.5? How much money he gets royalties from that book? How much did he make from the Trump Bible? Before I show you, because it's about to show you, this is how much of a cut he got from each Bible sold and how much he made entirely. And the answer is $1,306,035. Donald Trump made $1.3 million in 2024. That's what this spreadsheet covers, hawking that Christian Bible and getting a cut of every copy sold. And I want to talk about where did this Bible even come from? Who had this idea? But that spreadsheet that documents the money he's making, among other things, it showed he made over $57 million hawking cryptocurrency. He made $50 million from Mar-a-Lago, the memberships to it, I guess. And he earned a total income of $600 million because when you have no shame, you can fleece people out of anything. But he did make $1.3 million specifically from that Bible. The last time we saw anything about how much he made from the Bible, it was last August, well before the election happened. And at the time, it said he made $300,000. So between August and the election day, and I guess the end of December, he made $1 million more on that Bible. So what Bible is this? If you're not familiar, where did this even come from? This is the thing I want to show you. This is the God Bless the USA Bible, known as the Greenwood Bible, because this man in the photo, that creepy dude next to Trump, is Lee Greenwood, the guy who wrote God Bless the USA. And the story here is hilarious. Years ago, Lee Greenwood was trying to sell this Bible by himself. It was a translation of the Bible. He actually used a copyrighted translation and got in big trouble for that, so he changed it later. So it's the KJV non-copyrighted text of the Bible that reads like something from the 1500s. And it included the text of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, and by the way, because it's Lee Greenwood, it includes a handwritten chorus of his famous song. And guess what happened after he tried selling that book? Like, nobody bought it at all. Because why the hell do I want a Bible that's like the Lee Greenwood Bible? That looks hokey. And then later on, oh, by the way, he was selling that for, I believe, $49.99 plus shipping. So $50 plus shipping, and like nobody was buying it. Because why? Why would anybody do that? And then Trump came along and he's like, why don't we slap my name on that Bible and basically call it the Trump Bible? We'll sell it for an extra $10. So now it's $60 plus shipping. And it's available starting March of 2024, which is where that video came from. And nothing else changed. It's just the Trump Bible. And you saw the video. And it was funny at the time because Trump claims the Bible is his favorite book, even though back in 2015, he was asked to name his favorite verse. He could not think of a single one. Interviewer said, are you an Old Testament or a New Testament guy? The answer is obviously New Testament. That's the Jesus part. And Trump said, probably equal, because he doesn't know the difference. And it wasn't clear at the time when he slapped his name on this Bible and endorsed it. It wasn't clear how much of a cut he was going to get from every copy sold. But it was a clear reminder that conservative Christian voters, to them, religion and politics is now intertwined. He is quite literally pandering to Christians, selling them something they already own and could also easily get for free online because he just wanted their money and they're really dumb and he knew they would give him the money. But anyway, so they're selling this Bible. I want to show you one other thing that makes me laugh. I checked this just this week on their website and it's still there. There's an FAQ on this website and there's a couple of, is this Bible officially endorsed by Donald Trump? Yes. This is the only Bible endorsed by President Trump. Who's asking that question? Was there any doubt? And does anyone think if there was another Bible that would pay him bigger royalties, he wouldn't just go along and do that one? Whatever. That was interesting. This is creepy at the bottom. What if my Bible has sticky pages? That is, no worries. This is very uncommon with new Bibles that have gold gilding around the edges of the paper. I just like the question. What if J.D. Vance was reading this Bible on the couch? Why would it be sticky? What can I do about it? And they're like, watch this YouTube video. We'll help you out. And then at the very bottom, is any of the money from this Bible going to the Trump presidential campaign? And they say, no, none of it's going to any political campaign. But it does say, God bless the USA Bible.com uses Trump's name, likeness, and image under paid license from some group. And basically what that means is he gets a royalty from this, but it goes into his pocket, not the campaign, as if those two things are any different. So interesting. I also want to show you, if you haven't seen this before, do you know how many versions of the Trump Bible there are? I was kind of surprised by this because I thought it was just this version up here. Oh no, look at this. There are so many versions. There's the presidential edition Bible for $100. The First Lady edition Bible. I don't know what's different other than the cover, by the way. There's also the vice presidential edition Bible, which I assume has extra sticky pages. What else we got? The platinum edition, the golden age edition, as if the gold around the side wasn't enough. All of those are $100 each. The inauguration day edition Bible, in case you want to commemorate that for some reason. And then what do we have? Oh, the veteran edition Bible and the patriot edition Bible. They didn't change a damn thing, by the way. It's just the stupid cover. Oh, the pink and gold. You know, it's cheaper because, you know, ladies. The camo edition Bible, in case you need to use it as a bulletproof shield. And then a signed copy of the Bible for $1,000 plus shipping. Like, they are just milking this as much as they can because they know what you know, what I know, which is that there are so many dumb conservative Christians out there who are like, oh, there are collector's edition of this Bible? I need all of them for my collection. All for a book you know they never read. So this is the Bible that they are selling. I don't even know what else to say about this. I still find it funny that Christians accept Trump as a protector of their faith, given who he is. What is he? A thrice married racist who paid hush money to a porn star he was having an affair with when his current wife was pregnant with his fifth child. He is a convicted, or he's liable for sexual assault. He's the 2 Corinthians guy. He's the guy who bragged about non-consensually grabbing women because he was a celebrity. He lies about everything. He just bombed Iran. He says he doesn't need forgiveness. He held a Bible up in front of a church after his team used tear gas to drive away peaceful protesters. And most of that is from the first term. Like, he's only gotten worse since then. If you think that guy is the best promoter of a book where the main character is like, we should help the least of these, you didn't read the book. And you don't go to a good church, and there's something genuinely wrong with your moral character. I forgot to mention that who's buying these books? You may recall that Ryan Walters, the Oklahoma superintendent of public instruction, wanted to spend $6 million of taxpayer funds to buy 55,000 copies of the Trump Bible. But his office never spent that money, and the legislature wouldn't give him $3 million of that dollars of that money. So he never did that. But Ryan Walters did buy 500 copies of the Trump Bible to use in AP government classes. You may also recall he put up a whole thing of like, I need a publisher to supply us with Bibles for all these schools. And then he put out a list of rules that said it has to include the following: the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance, the Constitution. Like, it had to include all the stuff that just happens to be in the Trump version of the Bible. And the Trump Bible is the only version of the Bible that could meet the requirements in that time. And that's when everyone's like, you're just trying to give Trump a gift so he'll make you Secretary of Education. And then Trump went with the wrestling lady instead. One other thing I found interesting is that Christianity Today asked a guy who is like a Bible connoisseur, what do you think about the Trump Bible as a product? Like, is it a good Bible to purchase? Because this guy would know. And that Baptist minister said it was pretty cheaply made. He said, and I'm quoting here, I would expect this Bible to be maybe $15 to $20 tops. It disappoints me that it's even out there, and it disappoints me that people are making money off of this. This feels more like a money grab than anything else. Yeah, of course it's a money grab. Like, that is an accurate assessment of everything Trump does. He would sell off our national parks if he thought the money would go directly into his pockets. And yet conservative Christians, by and large, do not give a damn that he is using their religion to enrich himself in every way, by the way, except spiritually. But there you go. Trump made $1.3 million off of the Trump Bible so far. And that's a gift that keeps on giving, because he's not stopping hawking that book. I mean, you saw what he said in his speech about bombing Iran. At the end, he tossed in a quick, like, oh, thanks, God. We love you, God. Whatever he said. Like, he's not going to stop. All right. What questions do we have here? I'm very amused by some of these comments. What would Jesus say about all this? I don't know, but you know he's rolling over in his grave right now. What else we got here? Some of you are asking why we're doing the live stream right now. It's because I was gone last week on Thursday night. I will be gone again this week on Thursday night, and this is the only day I can do it. So we'll be back to a normal schedule very soon. All right. I apologize if I missed your comments. That's what happens when Den is not here. I still have a hard time in knowing we now have politicians who sell merchandise. Listen, it's wrong for everybody, but this is a Republican thing. I don't like that we're just saying politicians. It's a Trump specific thing, but the Republicans are not stopping him from doing it. Everyone really enjoys the sticky pages. I'm very impressed by this. How could we forget the Trump Bible in Oklahoma? There we go. All right, I'm going to scroll down here. Did I miss a super chat? I hope I got to it right now. So thank you, Olivia, for that. I hope I didn't miss it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next story here. Apologize if I'm missing stuff. The next story is semi-disturbing, just FYI, but it is important, so I want to share it. Okay. I think we're good here. I want to show you a picture of these people. These are two Michigan parents. Their names are Joshua and Rachel Pyland, and they just got sentenced last week to 20 years each in prison. And it's all because of their Christian faith, as they would describe it. But I want to share with you why they are actually going to prison, because hearing that they are actually going to spend significant time in jail was incredible news for a story that some of you may have been following because it's been going on for nearly a decade. So what is their story all about? Basically, in early 2017, that couple gave birth to a girl named Abigail. And she was born without any obvious problems, but they had a midwife. And the midwife who helped deliver the baby, when she went back the next day to check on baby Abigail, Abigail did not look healthy. And the midwife told Rachel, the mother, that you need to take this child to the hospital because this baby, and I'm quoting here, could suffer brain damage or die if not properly cared for. Rachel did not do that. In fact, after speaking with her husband, this is what she said. Rachel declined to seek any medical treatment for Abigail, stating, "God makes no mistakes." She indicated to the midwife that the baby was fine. God makes no mistakes. So she didn't take care of the baby at all. And guess what? Days later, Abigail was dead. And then Rachel and her husband Joshua prayed for Abigail's resurrection, and surprise, it did not work. So what was the problem with their daughter? What a medical examiner later found is basically, without using the medical terminology because it has more than 2 syllables, the baby had jaundice-related problems, which is to say it was all treatable. This baby could have been saved if she just saw a doctor, but she never had the chance to see a doctor, even when blood was coming out of her mouth, or when the baby was not eating, or when her skin was becoming further discolored. Why? Because her parents decided to put more trust in God than anyone who could actually help. So after their baby died, they were initially charged with involuntary manslaughter, and that conviction could have meant 15 years, up to 15 years behind bars. And then over the next several years, there were a bunch of tangential legal issues, including, guess what? These people have other kids. And should they be allowed to have custody of their kids? They actually have 4 living kids right now, 2 of whom were born after Abigail died. But as I say this, all 4 of them have been taken away from those parents' custody. So earlier this year, in March, a jury convicted this couple on charges of second-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. And I'll show you this in an article. This is about the kids that they have during the jury trial. Joshua Pyland testified that he also would not have sought medical treatment for 2 of the couple's children born after Abigail died, even though they suffered from the same condition that led to Abigail's death. Those children were seized by the state shortly after birth and received life-saving care at a hospital. So they're 2 kids that were born after their daughter died. The state said, you cannot have these kids. They took those kids. They gave them the medical treatment they needed. Those 2 kids are still alive. They also have 2 older kids, but again, they do not have custody anymore of any of these kids. So a jury had to consider what was going to happen here, and they were convicted. And this is where it gets interesting. They got convicted, but the question is, what is going to happen? How much time are they actually going to spend in jail? That was for the judge to decide. By the way, the jury only needed about 4 hours of deliberation to know they were guilty. And this is what's interesting. A judge this month decided, oh no, they are definitely going to prison. And look at this. In separate hearings, the judge on June 11th sentenced each of those parents to 240 to 540 months in prison, or 20 to 45 years for second-degree murder, and 225 months to 540 months in prison for first-degree child abuse. So, and those are concurrent. So that means they are going to spend, each of them, at least 20 years behind bars. There's 77 days for time served. And what seemed like a factually dense, complicated case turned out to be relatively simple in the end, the judge said. The jury found that Abigail died from the intentional withholding of medical care and convicted her parents of murder. He said, what you have done has impacted multiple lives. Yes. And this judge isn't allowing their religious beliefs to work as a get out of jail free card. He is saying you could have saved this girl after she was born. You chose not to. And because of that, you murdered your child. And you know what's amazing about this? In this case, the couple's own family spoke out against them. There were a couple things here. Look at this. This is Rachel's father. Glenn Kerr told his daughter she abandoned her family for counterfeit beliefs and built a wall to protect your irrational motives. That's her dad. In a statement read in court, Rachel's brother, Joel Kerr, said the Pylans chose their beliefs over their children. He asked for sentences sufficiently long that the couple can no longer bring life into the world just to snuff it out. When your own family is begging a judge, put these people in jail so that they cannot have kids, because if they do, there is a chance those kids will die. Unbelievable. And part of the reason the judge said he did not reduce their sentences is because the couple made it very clear they would murder any future child who had a similar preventable disease, because they've learned absolutely nothing over the past decade. Like, their brains are broken because of their religion. And thankfully, the secular courts are willing to do what those Christian parents would not, which is protect their living children. And so it's a fitting end to this couple that believes their faith gives them the right to murder people. And Rachel, by the way, is 38 years old. Her husband, Joshua, is 44. Even if they get out of prison early, for whatever reason, by the time they get out of prison, they will likely not be able to have children anymore naturally. And the ones that they do have by that time will hopefully be legal adults. So that's good news. I'm glad this couple is going away. I was following this story for years, and it bugged me that there were never any charges. Like, the legal case just dragged on forever, and they were never convicted. The trial kept dragging on. And finally this year, since 2017, this has been going on. Finally this year, there was a conviction, and now they've been sentenced. And in case you're wondering what their religion is, they belong to religious groups known as Free Saints Assembly and Faith Tech Ministries. I know, never heard of them. Doesn't matter. Both of them are Pentecostal religions. Both of them believe in faith healing, where you just pray for God to cure what doctors could totally cure. But neither of those religions actually prohibits families from seeing doctors. They actually leave that decision to individuals, even if they believe in faith healing. And this couple said, no, we're not going to see a doctor. We're just going to pray for cures. And it was stupid. Again, religion should never be a get out of jail free card for harming other people. And I'm so grateful that a judge and a jury took the common sense approach here instead of pretending this couple's faith was a source of virtue. So thank goodness for the rest of their kids, who will hopefully be safer now that their parents will be out of their lives. That's it. That's all I wanted to share with you. This is an interesting comment right here. Their daughter was neglected and basically murdered, and it wasn't an open and shut case. Yeah, it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is because there was always that possibility that this couple's sincere belief in their religion was going to give them enough to avoid actual punishment. So I'm so glad that that did not happen. What other questions do we have here? I am not sure if the woman's family is related to Kat Kerr, who is the purple-haired prophetess who makes up predictions for the future. Just making sure. It's an interesting question. We need a license to drive a car. Why not to procreate? You know, the more parents you meet, the more you realize there's a lot of truth to that. All right. Is there anything else here? I hope I'm not forgetting anything. This is unbelievable because you know that couple's pro-life. You know they have to be. They're that conservative, and yet they refused to do the one thing that could have helped their child live. They were willing to sacrifice that girl for the sake of their beliefs. And there are stories of other cults, other ministries, mostly in like Oregon and Idaho. These stories tend to pop up where they belong to a religious sect that says we are going to just pray for these kids to get better when they are at their most vulnerable. And you cannot allow their religious beliefs. It's one thing if they said, we are not going to go to a hospital because we are going to pray for ourselves to get healed. I don't care what happens at that point. That's on you. If you're an adult and that dumb, fine. Whatever happens to you, happens to you. But when you do it upon someone else, when you decide this girl needs to die because of your religion, you should not be allowed to get off the hook for it. And that has happened in Oregon and Idaho. I am glad that did not happen here. Okay, I'm going to jump to the next story. Give me 1 second. This all happened. You all heard the story of the man in Minnesota who murdered a sitting lawmaker. Her name was Melissa Hortman and her husband. And then he tried to murder a state senator, John Hoffman, and his wife. I think as of now, those two are still alive despite being shot. His name is Vance Belter. And that story happened after the last time I made a live stream. I haven't had a chance to talk about it here, but thankfully, Belter was caught. He's been charged. He's also been charged with federal crimes, which could result in the death penalty. That's a different story. But you may have already heard the tragic details of what happened, which is that this dude posed as a cop. Where did it go here? Give me 1 second. He posed as a cop and went to the homes of those two Democrats. So they opened their door. They thought he was a real cop. And then this guy shot and killed 2 people, shot and did not kill 2 others. And he was found after a massive manhunt nearly 48 hours later. I think right now he has not entered a plea or explained his motivation in his own words, but the signs suggest that this guy is a conservative Christian extremist who really did believe eliminating Democrats. By the way, in a legislature where the balance of power is split pretty much evenly, he thought eliminating Democrats would be good for his agenda. He is a registered Republican, or at least he was when he lived in Oklahoma, where they keep tabs on that. Minnesota doesn't have registered anything, but he is a strong supporter of Donald Trump, and he did vote for Trump more recently. And this has been called a politically motivated shooting. I believe that's the word Tim Walz used, Governor Tim Walz used when he was talking about this. It's politically motivated. But I think we can arguably say this is religiously motivated as well, because what we have seen about Belter is that for years, this guy worked as a missionary in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And there are clips of his sermons that are still online. And I want to play some of them for you because some of it is boilerplate Christianity. But now that you know what he did, some of it looks pretty damning in hindsight. For example, here is one sermon from 2023 where he said, I'll play it for you and then we'll talk about what he said.
God is going to raise up apostles and prophets in America
Le Seigneur va relever des pasteurs et des prophètes aux États-Unis
to correct his church.
pour corriger son Église.
And those that are connected to the
Et
body,
ceux qui sont connectés au corps,
they will come through this mess
ils vont quitter de cette confusion.
and they will be strong again.
Et ils seront forts encore.
And again, I've heard rhetoric like that at different churches. You know, God's going to raise up prophets and we are going to correct this church. But when you realize what this guy just did, you have to wonder, did he think of himself as a prophet? Did he think murdering people who stood in the way of his agenda was his way of correcting the church? That looks pretty damning in hindsight. In that same sermon, he actually talked about abortion, and I think that's also relevant to this.
Pastor Maurice
Le pasteur Maurice,
led prayer for America.
il a prié pour les États-Unis.
America's in a bad place.
Et les États-Unis, c'est pas un bon endroit.
The churches are so messed up.
Les églises sont vraiment en désastre.
They don't know abortion is wrong, many churches.
So he was very upset about abortion, and he said America's in a bad place and that a lot of churches don't know abortion is wrong. And one of the reasons that's relevant is because after they arrested this guy, they also found that the suspect's hit list, according to an official who has seen the list, comprised Minnesotans who have been outspoken in favor of abortion rights. CNN reported that it also included several abortion clinics, which doesn't sound like the work of the left. That's from the Minnesota Reformer outlet. But this guy was fully intent on killing people who spoke out in favor of abortion rights. So again, when you hear a pastor say, you know, some churches don't realize abortion is wrong, that's not unusual to hear at pretty much any conservative Christian church. Plenty of evangelical pastors say things like that. But when you hear what this guy did, that is damning in hindsight. Also, it never crosses his mind that the reason America might be in a bad place, which is the phrasing he used, is because of people like him and the way they try to force their views on everybody else. I don't know, just saying. There was one more sermon he gave at a different session where he talked about, of course, these people's favorite thing to talk about, trans people.
There's people, especially in America,
Il y a des gens, particulièrement aux États-Unis,
they don't know what sex they are. They don't know how their sexual orientation. They're confused.
ils ne savent pas ce qu'ils sont exactement, ils ont une confusion.
The enemy has gotten so far into their mind and their soul.
Et l'ennemi est entré dans le fond de leur pensée et de leur âme.
But this word
Mais cette parole
cuts deeper
va aux profondeurs
because it's living
parce qu'elle est
and
vivante
it's active.
et elle est agissante.
And God goes down there and pulls that out.
Elle peut entrer dans notre cœur et enlever tout ce qui est de mal.
And he sets every person free.
Et pour vous,
Again, boilerplate speech from conservative, hate churches. Also, he confuses gender identity and sexual orientation in there. But this idea that he doesn't understand LGBTQ anything. He doesn't understand it. That's clear. But he's like, they're confused. I don't get it, but they're confused. And that must be the work of Satan. Like this idea of just demonizing people you don't understand. I mean, that's not even a conservative Christian thing. That also applies to like Richard Dawkins. But again, that's where this guy was. This guy is so intent on creating us versus them. And the people who agree with him are good, and those who disagree with them are bad. That is what you hear from a lot of Christian preachers. But what this guy did is he took that so literally that he allegedly killed people who were standing in the way because he thought of them as others. Not people with whom he disagreed, but people who needed to get out of the way because he was fulfilling the mission of God. That's what it sounds like in hindsight. It's not like those clips are from decades ago. Those are from less than 2 years ago, right? This religious mindset just reeks of utter disdain for everyone who doesn't fully agree with him, despite his total ignorance about the people who don't fit his mold, right? In fact, one of his neighbors and close friends told the local news that this guy really hated abortion in the 1990s, but he actually had not talked about it in recent years. And two things about that. One is I just played you clips that show otherwise. He's still talking about it. But I wonder if there's no need to talk about abortion with your neighbor or friends anymore when it goes from, some issue you disagree with to a conviction that you have that you feel you're in the right of because you're fully on God's side. At that point, there's no room for debate. There's no room to talk about facts or discuss, what the solutions ought to be. This guy's not interested in changing minds at that point. He's just interested in promoting pro-life policies by murdering the enemies. So it didn't bother him at all. The hypocrisy of it all never bothered him. His ties to conservative Christianity are not just limited to the preaching either. This guy has been a religious radical for decades. This is from an article about him from Religion News Service, where they said on the now defunct website for Revo Formation, a nonprofit apparently founded by this dude, a biography said that he was ordained in 93 and had attended Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas, a charismatic, spirit-filled Bible school, according to its website that helps develop ministry skills. The biography said that Belcher had spent time in Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank, where it says he sought out militant Islamists in order to share the gospel and tell them that violence wasn't the answer. Well, that's ironic. But also this idea that, who he needs to see? Murderous people who belong to a different religion, so he can convince them they're wrong and they should avoid a life of violence. Anyway, who's more dangerous these days? I wonder. I read that last paragraph and I thought about John Allen Chow, that missionary who went to those islands off the coast of India because he was trying to reach an uncontacted tribe. It's like, buddy, they don't want to see you. They want nothing to do with you. It is more dangerous for you to try to convince them of anything than for you to just stay home. No one needs this from you. And Belcher had the same mindset, which is, what these religious extremists need in other parts of the world? They need me to convince them to worship Jesus and that violence is not the answer. Anyway, look where he turned out. Look how he turned out. That school, by the way, the Christ for the Nations Institute, they promote something called New Apostolic Reformation, which is a theology that says apostles and prophets will come back. They will be restored to help Christians take over everything, including government. And it's through something called the Seven Mountains Mandate. Like NAR proponents really advocate the Seven Mountains theology, which says there are 7 peaks that we need to overcome: government, politics, culture, things like that. And if you thought a person who graduated from this school might have mellowed out in the 3 decades since, well, his sermons show he has not changed at all. Wired magazine also got a hold of his Facebook profile before that was taken down, and it said he liked several missionary organizations. He liked a page honoring a famous German Pentecostal evangelist who worked in African countries. He also liked the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a conservative legal group known for being anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ. Now, most of those groups, I don't think, have said anything about this dude. They have not responded. They're not suggesting anything to do with what he did. And I also don't think it's necessarily fair to say, like, oh, look, this guy liked Alliance Defending Freedom, so Alliance Defending Freedom must bear some responsibility for what this guy did. I don't think that's fair to say. That said, I think it's fair for us to ask what role those radical beliefs played in what this guy did. Like, how many evangelical pastors are going to tell their congregations right now that supporters of abortion rights should not be treated as zealots, much less murderers, which is the language they use, even though they have disagreements? I don't think any of them are going to change their rhetoric on this. They literally demonize pro-choice proponents. They're not going to soften on their rhetoric because of what happened. They're going to keep treating abortion rights advocates as if they are murderers who deserve to be punished for it. There are conservative lawmakers who want to see abortion doctors put in prison. There are conservatives who want to see women who have abortions put in prison for murder. So, like, none of these people are going to soften their rhetoric. Also, like, if this guy really believed God was on his side and that God would forgive him for anything he did to advance God's agenda, even if it meant murder, it's like he never had any rational thoughts about why people might have different views on these subjects. I think some of the blame needs to be placed on any extremist Christian groups and the people who continue to perpetuate these ideas. Like, the people who believe this stuff don't all end up becoming murderers, but they certainly fuel the fires, right? And if one of your followers feels justified to kill people to advance those policy goals, you should at least take a second to think about how your rhetoric may have played a role in that. Because it's not like this guy's following the Ten Commandments and thou shalt not kill. This guy thought he's obligated to follow God's rules, except for one of the rules God supposedly etched into stone, or told Moses to etch into stone. This guy made it really easy to figure out what he did, right? He's a right-wing, anti-abortion nut job who believes his mission in life is to spread the gospel to black people as part of an effort to take over the world for his God. He was spurred by Christian leaders who keep telling him that this way of life is the only way for everybody. It's not that they told him to kill, it's that they told him anything he did to advance his cause would be worth it because you are helping the kingdom of God. This guy was deluded, and then he acted upon those delusions. I'm not saying he struggled from a mental illness. I don't know anything about that. But I think based on what you see from his online content, the sermons he did, this was a religious mission for him. He was acting because he thought God would be happy. Let's acknowledge that. And while most of these groups have not responded to anything, there was recently a release from that Christian school, Christ for the Nations. They put out a statement because, like, they've never been in the press until this guy got arrested. And this is what they said. We are now able to confirm that Mr. Vance Luther Belter was indeed enrolled as a student here until 1990 when he graduated, blah, 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 blah. We are absolutely aghast and horrified that a CFNI alumnus is the suspect. This is not who we are. This is not what we teach. This is not what we model. We have been training Christian servant leaders for 55 years, and they have been agents of good, not evil. Well. CFNI unequivocally rejects, denounces, and condemns any and all forms of violence and extremism, be it politically, racially, religiously, or otherwise motivated. Our mission is to educate and equip students to spread the gospel through compassion, love, prayer, service, worship, and value for human life. These core Christian values and principles, which we rightly esteem and embrace, are in stark contrast to the hateful beliefs, behavior, and actions now being attributed to Mr. Belcher. I gotta say, that's not a bad statement. I appreciate that they are saying that. I don't know about this is not who we are. Because even if they're not all murderers, if you're trying to figure out which types of Christians are causing the most harm in the world, who are terrorizing people who are not like them, it's the sort of people who grow up in this sort of theology. Again, they're not all murderers, but they do serve to make life miserable for everyone who's not like them. This is also interesting. CFNI has had no contact with this dude since his time as a student 35 years ago. We are completely unaware of what led to this kind of mental, emotional, social, and spiritual bankruptcy since he left CFNI. Okay, fine. I appreciate that their public relations department put out this statement. But again, if you are this school and one of your graduates who is following the beliefs that you instilled in him goes on to do this stuff, yes, I get why you want to denounce that and condemn that, and you should. But also, have you taken a look and given any thought to maybe the way you train people could spur some of them to do something horrible? And are you going to change anything you say or do? Not your beliefs. I get that their beliefs are not going to change, but the way they communicate it. And it's clear this school is not going to change anything it does. So I don't know. You could take that press release however you want to take it. I appreciate that they put something out, but this idea that we have nothing to do with what this guy did, that's not exactly fair either. They should bear, everyone who's connected with this guy should at least try to acknowledge if something they did may have spurred this guy's actions. Or if not, if you don't want to take any responsibility for that, at least ask yourself, what am I doing to make sure that I'm advocating for my beliefs while reiterating that hurting other people is never the answer, that terrorizing them, that fighting against their civil rights, not their religious rights, their civil rights, is never the answer. None of them are changing anything they're doing about that. What questions do we have here? There's a lot of comments I'm not going to post right now. A lot of comments about Dallas. Yeah, there's a lot of scary stuff going on in Texas in general. All right, I'm going to move on to the next bit. I hope I didn't skip anything too much. Let me go to the next story here. Only had a couple more for you, but I wanted to make sure I got them in today. This is one I think a lot of you have been emailing me about, so I have to discuss this one. All right. Let's talk about Michael Tate. This is Michael Tate. He is the lead singer of Newsboys. And honestly, I swear, as someone who did not grow up in the Christian music scene, why have I heard of Newsboys? Because if you've ever seen God's Not Dead or the trailer for any of the God's Not Dead movies, you have heard their music. They're the ones that sing, God's not dead, he's really alive. Lyrics are not their thing. But this is Michael Tate, and he's the lead singer of Newsboys. He's been with them for many, many years. He's had a decades-long career with them. And the reason Michael Tate is in the news here is because he's been accused of grooming and sexually assaulting multiple people, including minors. And the reason we know this is because not that long ago, earlier this month, rather, a couple weeks ago, the Roy's Report, a Christian news outlet, they posted this article, exclusive. Former Newsboys frontman Michael Tate accused of sexual assault, grooming, and substance abuse dating back to 2004. And this article spoke with a handful of young men, not women, by the way, men, who told the reporter here that Tate had used alcohol and drugs before attacking them. And this is what they said here. 2 men stated that they were drinking alcohol with Tate and later woke to him fondling their genitals. One alleged Tate also offered him cocaine while on the Newsboys tour bus. The third told the Roy's Report that Tate gave him a back massage while skinny dipping and later invited him to share his king-size bed. There, Tate allegedly non-consensually massaged his anal region. Disturbing allegations all around, and this is what these men are saying. Tate is not just a random dude, by the way, and I think this is why this story is so important. I mean, those allegations would be a big deal no matter who did it, but it's because of Tate's stature in the Christian world. He's not just the front man for some popular Christian band. He is a graduate of Liberty University. He was a founding member of DC Talk, a group that has won multiple Grammys. They won them in the 1990s. There are very few people in the world of Christian music who have a larger footprint and greater crossover appeal. Like, he is one of the most famous modern Christian singers of our time. And when you start to look at things he has said and done over the course of his career, there's some disturbing stuff. Like when he went to Liberty, this is how Liberty promoted this dude back in 2012. Looking back, Michael Tate sees Dr. Jerry Falwell, like the older dude, not the younger guy who likes watching his wife sleep with pool boys, but the older Dr. Falwell. Tate sees Dr. Falwell as a father figure to his life. I would always joke with him, calling him my white daddy. Oh, that's a statement that did not age well. Let's never say that again. I'm sorry, I had to read that, and now you have to read that. But that's a thing. He also co-authored a book called Under God, and check out this reporting from The Guardian. It's a book promoting Christian nationalism, And it claimed the U.S. is suffering a collapse of moral values because of the secularization of government and public schools. He co-authored a book saying, because we don't have Jesus, everything's very immoral these days, says the guy who's now been accused of some very disturbing things. This guy endorsed Ted Cruz for president in 2016 for some dumb reason, but then later switched to Donald Trump because he spoke with preacher Paula White, who convinced him, and then he later performed in the White House. And Michael Tate released this video that I got to play for you, where he's thanking President Trump.
Mr. President, my name is Michael Tate, a native born in Washington, D.C., 4 blocks northeast of the U.S. Capitol. And here with Chris Leader, went to Paula White and her husband Jonathan, just to say, I love you, I support you. One of the growing numbers of African Americans, people with brown skin that love you, support you, and more pointedly, prison reform. Christians doing what you're doing, love it, love it, love it. Had a brother in jail, my brother, 13 months older than me, but 35 years in prison. Just got out, struggling, trying to get a job, trying to get his life back on point. Kind of like the movie Shawshank Redemption. It's tough. It's tough to do. But thank you for all you're doing. Look forward to meeting you, hanging out, eating some McDonald's Big Macs, and whatever else. God bless you. Michael Tate loves you, supports you. Go for it, Mr. Trump.
I really don't love that he's like, I'm speaking on behalf of black men here, and a lot of us love you. And just the sucking up, like, can't wait to eat Big Macs with you. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to prostrate yourself like that. So anyway, where did these allegations were published in the Royce Report earlier this month, but the rumors of them actually began circulating back in January of this year because there was a popular TikToker who outed Tate as gay, and that was disturbing. I don't think it was a misconduct allegation necessarily. Maybe it was. Maybe the allegation on TikTok was that a male said Michael Tate did something to me, which insinuated he was gay, but also it was more serious because there was misconduct involved. But like shortly after that TikToker said this, Michael Tate actually released this statement in January. You could see the date, January 16th. But look at what he wrote. He basically said, you know, I've been doing this for a while. Together with DC Talk and Newsboys, we wrote and produced music I'm deeply proud of, from Born Again and We Believe to Worldwide Revival, and of course, God's Not Dead. While this may come as a surprise, given I've been touring ever since college, I've made for me what is a monumental and heartfelt decision that it is time to step down from Newsboys. And he didn't really explain why he was doing it, but that was kind of a shock in the Christian music industry that this guy who had been in the limelight for so many decades was stepping down from the band that he helped make famous. And he didn't explain any reason why he was stepping back. But also, like, there were a lot of people who may have seen this but didn't say anything at the time. They may have heard rumors about him, but they didn't say anything at the time because they knew revealing he was... I'm wondering what they thought was more damning. The idea that he was into men, which I don't care, or the idea that he was abusing these people, which could not just hurt his career, but backfire on them, as it does for so many people who speak up. But I think, part of this, the fact that more people didn't speak out against it is a huge indictment of the conservative Christian world. I've heard some people say that Michael Tate's actions are like the worst kept secret in the Christian music world. What does that say about that industry that so many people knew that these allegations were out there, but decided to keep quiet? That's disturbing. So after the survivors' stories were made public by the Royce Report earlier in June, the fallout was pretty swift. And the Newsboys, the band, they released this statement. And you could see this, the date here, June 5th, is when they put out this statement. Last night, our hearts were shattered when we read the news alleging drug abuse, that's not really the issue, and inappropriate sexual actions by our former lead singer Michael Tate. While Michael has not addressed these allegations, we are devastated even by the implications. Yes, their hearts are with the victims, That's good. They don't condone any form of sexual assault. The four of us are husbands and fathers. Between the four of us, we have 14 children. What is this, a humble brag? You don't have to be a husband or a father to acknowledge this stuff is wrong. You can just be horrified because you're a human. You don't need to be like, we have a lot of children, therefore we know harming kids is bad. Like, what is that? Anyway, when he left the band in January, Michael confessed to us and our management that he had been living a double life, but we never imagined that it could be this bad. Which makes you wonder, what did they think he meant? That he had been living a double life? Do they think his confession was, you guys, I'm secretly gay? And they were like, well, that's bad. But now they found out there was abuse involved, and they're like, oh, that's really bad. Like, this is not the greatest statement to release in response to what he did. But okay, they responded to it. And very quickly, too, this is interesting. This is also from the Roy's report. Christian radio stations started dropping the Newsboys from their lineup. This dude in Minnesota, he's the program director, and he made the decision to pull all Newsboys music from the station immediately after he read the report in solidarity with the survivors. I pulled all of my Newsboys music from The Pulse the morning of June 5th. Beyond Tate's crimes, the band is complicit if they were aware of what he was up to or suspected what he was up to and were covering for him. And at the time, there's no evidence they knew about this and were covering up. But again, their statement sucked. As someone who has hosted Newsboys in concert, played them on the air, and helped them build their platform, I feel deeply betrayed. I'm ashamed that I played a part in helping build the celebrity that Tate exploited to prey on others. Okay, I mean, I find that interesting that even Christian program directors are like, I'm done with this band. And then, after all this, on June 10th, Michael Tate finally issued a more recent statement. This is on Instagram. My confession, June 10th. There's so many weird things in here, but let's read through some of this. Recent reports of my reckless and destructive behavior, including drug, don't care, and alcohol abuse, don't really care, and sexual activity. Oh, that's a weird phrase to use for what you are accused of. I don't care who you have sex with. It's not the activity that's the problem. Are sadly largely true. For some 2 decades, I used and abused cocaine, consumed far too much alcohol, and at times touched men in an unwanted sexual way. Yeah, that's the problem. It's not sexual activity. I am ashamed of my life choices and actions and make no excuses for them. I will just call it what God calls it, sin. I don't blame anyone or anything but myself. While I might dispute certain details in the accusations, I do not dispute the substance of them. You know what I have a problem with in that paragraph? He just calls it sin, as if drinking a little too much and allegedly sexually assaulting random unsuspecting men are just in the same pile of bad things. Because you know what happens when you call it sin? It gives Christians a license to say, you didn't do this. It was Satan guiding you to do this, and you didn't know well enough to protect yourself from Satan. You're the victim, and Michael Tate's the victim in all of this. Like, don't call it a sin. Just say, look, I did this. It was wrong. I will take accountability, whatever. And don't lump in sexual assault with, I drank a little too much at times. When he left the Newsboys in January, I did so to get help. I was not healthy, physically or spiritually, and was tired of leading a double life. I spent 6 weeks. Here's the rehab clinic thing where he's like, look, I got help. I've been clean and sober since, though I still have a lot of hard work ahead of me. That's setting himself up for the tour that he will inevitably launch after whatever, a few months, a year, his comeback tour. Like he's already getting the help. I'm ashamed to admit that for years I've lied and deceived my family, friends, fans, and even misled my bandmates about aspects of my life. I was, for the most part, living 2 distinctly different lives. Whatever. I don't care about his double life. It's the illegal, immoral conduct that's the problem. And now comes all the Jesus shit. No one cares. No one cares. He's on this path of healing, blah, blah, blah. Sin is a terrible thing. I don't care. To the extent my sinful behavior has caused anyone to lose respect or faith and trust in me, I understand, deserve, and accept that. But it crushes me to think that someone would lose or choose not to pursue faith and trust in Jesus because I have been a horrible representative of it. Again, by pretending that what you do is about Jesus, you're trying to distract from what you actually did. No need to read that last paragraph either. It's just, what sort of an apology is that? There's so many problems. It leans way too heavily on the idea that everything is fine now or going to be fine because of Jesus. It treats abuse as sexual activity as if what he did is no different from what two men consensually do together, which it's not. He says the problem is that he touched men in an unwanted sensual. Did you see that word? He said he touched men in an unwanted sensual way. Did I say sexual? I was wrong. He said an unwanted sensual way. That makes this even worse. What the hell? That's such a weird word to use when you hear what he actually did. And again, he says he repents of sin, but what sins is he talking about here? Does he think homosexuality is one of them? Does he think that needs fixing? Because I don't care. Don't care who he sleeps with consensually. Don't care if he's gay. It's irrelevant to me because I'm not a conservative Christian with a stick up my ass. Like if he's clean and sober now too, that's great. But it also, the way he wrote that, it makes it sound like the drinking and drugs were to blame for what he did to those men. And it's not as if all of his sober decisions were fine. And then after all of this, get this, after he posted that a few days later, The Guardian posted a new investigation because they heard from other of his victims. And this time it got even worse. He stole a piece of our souls. Christian music star Michael Tate accused of sexual assault by 3 men. When I first saw this article, I'm like, oh, right. It's the victims who were in that Roy's Report article, right? Just a little bit ago. And then look at what they found. First of all, they got names. Sean Davis, who was a lifelong fan and troubled youth who had immersed himself in Christian music, claims Tate pushed him to consume alcohol and cocaine on multiple occasions. He also says he believes Tate once secretly drugged him and then molested him in 2003 while he was still a minor. This man destroyed my life, Davis now claims. So now we're talking about children. We already talked about that statement. But okay, according to that Guardian article, there were other victims that the Roy's Report did not mention. And the victims that the Guardian found involved 2 minors. And you could see this right here. Check this out. The Guardian has interviewed 25 people in the Christian music industry, most of whom say they had prior knowledge of allegations that Tate had engaged in abusive behavior. The men who have come forward and shared their alleged experiences, 2 agreeing to go on the record with their names, while the rest spoke on the condition of anonymity, were aged 13 to 29 at the time of their alleged experiences. So now Michael Tate is not just abusing men who were not asking for it. He's abusing children as young as 13, according to the allegations. Another man in that article, as one reader points out, another man said Tate repeatedly groped his penis. A different person, who was also 13 at the time, said Tate exposed himself at a bathroom urinal. It is not clear which of those people overlap with the ones who spoke to the Roy's Report. But again, given that some of them say they were minors at the time, these are different names than the ones we heard initially. And all of this came out after Tate released that weird statement about sensually touching people in unwanted ways. So what happens now? I mean, it is possible that he chooses the path so many Christians in similar predicaments have gone down, where you disappear for a little while, and you announce a brand new solo tour, following a very short period of counseling and repentance and prayer. And you can already see the seeds of that in that Instagram statement. And by the way, this is not nearly the same thing. There were allegations against a Christian comedian, John Crist, years ago, of abusing the power dynamic and trying to hook up with some of his fans and things like that years ago. I don't remember the specifics of the allegations, but he was canceled for a short time in the Christian world. And just the other week, he did a set on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Like, he's doing just fine. You know what I mean? So these people always do the same thing. They're like, I'm going away, I'm getting the help I need, and then they come right back as if nothing ever happened, without recognizing that the issues people are upset about are very different from the ones Tate is publicly acknowledging. I don't know how seriously to take anything he's saying. And by the way, just a couple of days ago, there was another article in the Roy's Report. Look at this headline. This is from June 19th. Woman, hey, it's a woman this time, accuses Michael Tate of drugging her and watching while she was raped. And she says the Newsboys tour manager covered it up. So now it's not just Tate abusing somebody. The Newsboys tour manager was allegedly aware of all this. So the biggest band in the Christian world is now implicated in what this guy did. I don't know what's going to happen from here. I did not know there was a way to make the God's Not Dead movies even worse, but they always find new ways to do it. But wild story concerning one of the biggest acts in the Christian music industry. What questions do we have here? As you could see, because of the timing of this live stream, the light is coming into the room. What questions do we have here? This is referring Jerry Falwell Jr., but watching us fuck other people is the least gross thing about him. Totally agree with you. I do not care what Jerry Falwell Jr. does in his bedroom, even if it's salacious. It's the hypocrisy. I had to read that, so you had to read that. Why do you do this to us? Because I hate you, and you are all my enemies, and that is the reason why. Please support me on Patreon. Thank you for gifting all those memberships. I appreciate it. I don't know if this one's directed to me, but love you too, unless you are my enemy. And I also appreciate gifting all these memberships. Thank you all for doing that. That's wonderful. Am I missing any questions? I hope I'm not. There are so many of you. I hope Den is back next time. Okay, I'm going to jump to a different story. Last story I wanted to share with you. I have not posted this online yet, but I will soon. Thankfully, it's not nearly as serious as the one I just shared with you. Okay. Let me just pull this up really quick. In Pennsylvania, there is a state representative. Her name is Stephanie Borowitz, and she's a Christian nationalist who's been in office since 2018. She just introduced, she says she's going to introduce legislation, a resolution rather, recognizing September 12th as the Day of the Bible. And if you read this, like, there's no actual document yet. You could see that down there. She hasn't actually submitted this resolution. But in this, she says she's going to introduce this resolution designating September 12th as the Day of the Bible. Why September 12th? Because that's the day the U.S. Congress in 1782 officially authorized the publication of the first complete English language Bible printed in America, the Aitken Bible. This marked a profound moment in American history, linking the foundational ideals of liberty and faith. And what is the point of the resolution? You can see the bullet points down here. It is to recognize the Bible's long-standing influence on American and Pennsylvanian culture, morality, and civic life, to commemorate the historic role Pennsylvania played in the Bible's publication and preservation, and to encourage citizens, schools, and institutions to reflect on the Bible's enduring role in promoting the values of justice, redemption, personal responsibility, and compassion, which is wild because the people who tend to promote Christianity in politics are the least compassionate, least willing to take responsibility, and least just people you will ever meet. So this is what Borowitz is planning to introduce. And let's talk about the Aitken Bible for a second, because that deserves some discussion in and of itself. She says this resolution is significant because it commemorates the day Congress authorized the publication of this English language Bible, the Aitken Bible. She says that book is endorsed by Congress and the congressional chaplains, and that illustrates how deeply rooted spiritual values were in the formation of our republic. But her facts are wrong. Like, the Aitken Bible is one of those props that people like David Barton bring up in their presentations, because in his telling of the story, what David Barton does, because he's a liar, is he says the Aitken Bible was printed by Congress and intended for use in public schools, and that's a reason church-state separation should not exist. But again, David Barton is a liar, because guess what? Aitken himself, not Congress, wrote the note that said this should be used in schools. Also, Congress did not endorse his Bible. They merely said government chaplains confirmed this is an accurate representation of the Bible and you can publish it. Congress did not buy copies of it. They did not print it themselves. They did not pay for it to be published. They basically said, yeah, you can do whatever you want with this Bible, whatever. But because Barton has spent so many years promoting the Aitken Bible as evidence that we are in a so-called Christian nation, it's kind of canon in the world of Christian revisionists that this Bible is the true Bible. In fact, Tennessee put out a list of its official state books. They tried to pass a resolution saying these are our official state books, and they included the Aitken Bible in their list of state books. That was last year. Now, why is Borowitz doing this? She has basically used her time in office to promote Christianity anytime she could. This is a few years ago where she posted a resolution doing what? This is a resolution designating March 30th, 2020 as a state day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer. And by the way, if that date rings a bell, it's because it was right after COVID started, and she called COVID a punishment inflicted upon us for our presumptuous sins. She thought COVID was sent to us by God to punish us for what? For gay people existing. Things like that. What else has she done here? She wants to put the Ten Commandments in public schools. This is a bill she also says she plans to file. But as I said in an earlier story, that's been shot down by the courts, so it's not going to get anywhere. What else has she done? This is interesting. This is just a tweet from Right Wing Watch. But look at this. Pennsylvania State Rep Stephanie Borowitz claims that 65% of all the founding documents came from Jesus's words and the Bible. We have no idea what she's talking about, and neither does she. Yeah, that's just a made-up statistic. I have no clue what she's referring to there. There is also maybe her most infamous thing that she's done since getting into office. In 2019, Pennsylvania swore into office its first Muslim legislator. Her name is Movita Johnson-Harrell. And that's a big deal. That's a big first in the state of Pennsylvania. And so Borowitz decided to use that day to deliver an invocation in the state house. And in 90 seconds, she brought up the name Jesus like 13 times, to the point where you're not giving an invocation. You're just trying to make sure your new Muslim colleague doesn't make any headway into the state, because you're trying to remind everyone that this legislature is all about Jesus. It was so rude that the new Muslim lawmaker told reporters that she expected to face discrimination as a Muslim woman, but, quote, I did not think it would come on the actual day of my swearing in. And in 2023, when discussing a symbolic resolution from Democrats to designate Climate Week across the state, Borowitz said that she didn't need to worry about climate change because the Bible said so. And I'm going to play that for you here.
When Democrats are pushing bills like banning gas-powered mowers and gas-powered stoves in New York City, all under the name of a climate control agenda, we can all see what is really going on here. The truth is in Genesis 8:22, it says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. I'll say that again, will never cease. Of course, we are to be good stewards of God's creation, but not through a forceful climate control global agenda. I'm a no. Thank you, Chairman.
That forceful climate control global agenda was about a symbolic resolution designating Climate Week. Also, as long as the earth endures, what the hell? But like, this is who Borowitz is. Everything is about Jesus, which would be fine if she were a preacher or a lady who was just at home. But like, that's the job she wants. She wants to be a preacher. She shouldn't be in the legislature then. That's not the job she has. Her job is to represent her constituents, including non-Christians, not shilling for Jesus at a time when more than ever, we need sensible lawmakers to use reason-based evidence. She's such a waste of space in the Pennsylvania House. But again, she's coming from a red seat. In 2024, she won re-election with about 70% of the votes. And Democrats have a slim one-vote majority in the state house. So her resolution hopefully won't go anywhere, even if it's just symbolic in nature. And also there's a Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro. Republicans, however, control the state Senate. I also want to point out, I just saw this recently, that this push to make the Day of the Bible, it turns out there's another senator, Doug Mastriano, who is not just another Christian nationalist, but also a failed gubernatorial candidate. He just ran in the last cycle as the Republican nominee for governor and got crushed. He plans to introduce this same resolution in his chamber that Republicans do control. Hopefully it won't go anywhere, but this is what these people are doing. Like, the world's on fire, and these people are like, you know what we don't have enough of? Acknowledging the Bible. I don't know. That's what they're doing in Pennsylvania. That's what Republicans are doing in that state. And I know, look, Democrats in Pennsylvania don't have the best track record either. John Fetterman is not great, but like, there you go. That's what they're doing. What other questions do we have here? Otherwise, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. Like I said, the reason I'm doing this on a Sunday is because this is one of the few days I had off in the span of like 3 weeks. So I will be back in about a week and a half on our usual Thursday nights. And I hope I will see you then. If you have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate all of you for being here today. Dusty Dark Horse says, but I'm the immoral one for not inviting Christ into my heart. I don't know if this is this story or the last story, probably the Michael Tate story. But yeah, like all the claims that atheists are immoral, when we see what Christian leaders do, it's not that atheists can't be immoral. It's that our atheism isn't the reason we might be. All right. I think that's it. Thanks again. You know where to find me. You can always subscribe to friendlyatheist.com for free. You can always support what I do by going to patreon.com/Hemant. If you're watching the NBA Finals, have fun doing that. If you're coming to the AHA, American Humanist Association convention in Chicago this week, please be sure to say hello. And I will see you all very soon. Have a good rest of your week. And hey, if you're in New York, go vote for Mamdani. Rank him as your number one. See you later.